Hey everybody, well thank you for clicking watch. My name is Ben Rowe. I lead the church called Emmanuel London in Greenwich, and I am here with the wonderful Stu and Livy Gibbs, who actually planted that church originally and are about to plant another one, which is hugely exciting. And so we want to talk a little bit about past and future. And so it's great to be here with you both. First of all, I guess it'd be great to hear about the journey so far. What's happened? How did you get here?
Yeah, well, I mean, it depends how far back you want to go, but we've basically had our whole adult lives have been kind of involved in church planting. We both went to university in Bristol and joined the church plant, got involved really early on, kind of took some of our first steps in leadership, I guess, in that church plant, moved into an area in the city to deliberately try and take the gospel of Jesus in and see what God would do in that area, reach new people, so that had a kind of pioneering aspect to it. And then one day we really felt God speak to us quite clearly and tell us very specifically to move to Greenwich and start a new church.
I heard that was when you were washing up as well.
Yeah, that was a very strange experience. It wasn't the kind of thing that happens very often, as in washing up doesn't happen that often. But particularly when I wash up, it's not that common for me to have such a clear kind of directive word from God, just telling me very precisely really what to do. So we didn't really have a choice. It was like God told us what to do. We talked about it, we prayed about it, but we knew we needed to be obedient and move to Greenwich and start a new church.
Brought our little family. At that time we had 2 kids under 3, and up sticks, sold off our house, moved to South East London to Greenwich, and just got stuck in starting a church from scratch, from like a handful of people in our front room, to the point where now is good 100 or so adults, and it's a thriving church. Well, as you know, because you're now leading it.
I do. I have the pleasure of the benefit of all the hard work being done, and I'm sure there'll be some more in the future. Tell us a bit about what that was like then. So moving from one city to London. I know both of you were from London originally anyway, but just some of the journey moving into Greenwich and getting a church out of the ground. What did that look like? Talked about the front room.
Yeah, it's amazing. I think we've genuinely found it's a total privilege to be involved in something starting out of nothing. You've got a vision, you've got a faith, you hear God, and then you're basically walking it through one step at a time. People start to join and gather, and it gets momentum and it gets launched, and all the aspects of what a church is start to form, like literally around you. So you see a worship team, you see people getting involved in listening to God's word, reading the Bible, praying, reaching out to friends, caring for people around them in the community, like raising their kids. People join the church who didn't know Jesus at all, who were like coming to say, what is this? What does it mean to follow Jesus? People coming into the area who'd moved in because of jobs or like changes in life circumstances, people that had lived in the area all their lives. Like that was our experience, wasn't it? It was that the church kind of grew under our kind of care, and we grew loads as we learnt that, and as we kind of learnt through that journey, and just saw God do more, I think, than we'd thought about be possible through us.
And it was like alternately incredibly exciting, because you'd see what God was doing and it was like, this could be amazing, you know.
There was some pretty tough bits
other
as
times
well.
that were just absolutely terrifying, because I remember when we first got there, I remember going for a walk and kind of walking around Greenwich, like lovely summer's day, everyone's out in the park, and just thinking, why would any of these people come to a church that we lead? And it was just kind of like panic and realizing, this whole thing is only going to work if God breathes on us and does something miraculous. It's complete. There's nothing I can do to persuade all these very happy, content-looking people that they need to turn up a church instead, you know. So it was like moments of terror, you know, that really lead you to prayer, and in a good way help you to think, this is really, we need God's work in us and through us in an amazing way.
And there were challenges, like we faced challenges, like I think in our own family life faced challenges. We found some aspects of pioneering like took us to a place where we felt quite vulnerable, but we also, I think, sensed that churches grow because God loves churches and because God grows churches. And so we were doing what we knew we could do with the gifts we had, the skills we had, the experience we had, but at times we were on our knees. And I think that's how you lead churches.
It's amazing. So tell us a little bit, you just talked about family life, and when you first planted the church, you talked about having...
had little kids, and now we've got big kids.
Tell us a little bit about behind the scenes in the Gibbs home.
So we've got 4 children in our home. 3 of them were born to us, 3 sons who are in their teens. Eldest is getting ready to fly the nest, kind of done with living at home. And then we also are foster carers. And so we've got a fourth son who lives with us, who is now part of our family. And yeah, I'm surrounded by boys. I spend my life dealing with everything to do with raising young men. So yeah, that's our immediate family. We've always had a heart for children. Like when we lived in, when we were first married, when we were living in Bristol, we moved actually into like a really multiracial area deliberately in the city, and lived around loads of families of different types of kind of structures in family life. But one of the things that was really significant was that we spent a lot of time around kids that didn't have kind of stable home environment. And that's really our story of how we got into foster care, that we could just see that, like, what God was calling us to. One of the things God was calling us to as we built our own family was to actually also open our doors out and open our home for other kids to be part of our family. So that's been our story. That's how we live as a family.
Yeah, I think it is interesting in terms of church planting, because we had these little kids when we first turned up.
Sorry to interrupt you, Steve. It's Stu, but we've got some drinks.
Yay, a nice
wonderful.
cup of coffee.
I was trying to work out what I might have said that was terribly wrong.
Nice.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Is that why it's yours, isn't it?
Yeah, very happy.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Nice.
Oh, everything is all okay now.
Everything's right with the world.
Sorry, can you remember where you were?
Yeah, little kids, now big kids.
Yeah, just the difference really of, you know, when we moved to plant the church in Greenwich, we were both 28, I think.
Yeah.
And our kids were 3 and 1.
You didn't have
like,
wrinkles.
certain stage of life.
Didn't have any grey hair.
And just whereas now, obviously, like Liv says, we've got
wrinkles.
We've got kids that could join our church, you know, as
Yeah.
adults.
Yeah.
And I think that does. You learn a lot, obviously, from raising kids and just wanting to be leaders that, I guess, have that kind of fatherly, motherly care for people in the church and help develop people and mature them and help them through life. And I think we're probably learning something about that as our kids are older in a different way to, you know, when we had to change their nappies, you know, it's a different life skill.
But we've brought up our kids in London. Like, we love living in the city with our family. We love what that brings in terms of family life. We totally access city stuff. We kind of come into central London all the time from home, which is a little bit further out, just so that we can be part of this city. And our kids have grown up loving London, and we're actually trying to persuade them to think that there are other places in the world they could live. They don't have to live here. So yeah, I think raising kids in the city is an amazing opportunity to bring them into like a multicultural world, have their eyes opened. I mean, this city is extraordinary in terms of who is in this city and what is in the city of London, and I'm so excited that that's what our young men have kind of grown into in their lives.
So already you guys have talked about family, about young people. It's clearly, it just oozes out of you, sort of this huge heart. And I know, again, one of the areas that we've worked together has been with New Day, this national youth event, and you guys were part of really pioneering that.
From the beginning, when it didn't
the ground,
exist.
seeing hundreds of people come to faith, which is amazing. That's been part of your journey with Emmanuel Greenwich. What does some of the journey also lead you into? So we're going to talk in a moment about the future, why London Bridge, some of the things that you'd have in your heart for London Bridge. But what have you learned over 15 years of doing church in South East London? The next generation is huge for you. What else would be some of the things that would really stand out for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think in all of it, actually, all the things you say, like New Day, church leadership, church planting, and parenting as well.
Yeah.
I think
And fostering.
Yeah. You just discover more and more how important foundations are. And I think we knew that when we planted last time. But if anything, I think even more, we feel like, okay, we want to start this new church. We've got this opportunity as a blank sheet of paper. And I love that's one of the things I love about church planting. Is like, okay, you can start again. You go back to the scriptures and you look at, okay, what were Jesus's priorities? What did he care about? What did he pray for? What was he after? What did he invest in? And you get the opportunity to kind of rethink what should church be like and what should our priorities be and what kind of culture are we trying to form in the church. So certainly things like discipleship and helping people grow depth in their spiritual life, in their walk with Jesus. So
and in a healthy way. So people are convinced that knowing God is wonderful for them. It's deep. It's going deep into the way you think. It's deep into your emotional well-being. It's deep into how you build your friendships, how you talk to one another, what kind of job you do. It's kind of like it soaks. Knowing God soaks into the middle of who you are, and then spreads out into everything that you touch with your life. And I think that's churches that look like that is what we're excited about.
I think like theological foundations as well, like just convictions. I think these days there's so much going on in the world, even in the Christian world, where people are asking questions, what does this mean? What does the Bible say about that? And just trying to help people get to a place of real clarity and conviction about scriptures so that we can be faithful to it, but learn what that actually looks like in a city like London that's, like we say, hugely multicultural, quite secular at its core, and
got loads of confusing messages, isn't it?
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
Like people are bombarded by confusion. Even Christians who people are following Jesus and saying, I think this is what Christianity means. Even that is a confusing load of messages.
Sure.
Yeah, so
it's a huge challenge. I mean, like I say, being a Christian in the middle of the city is a massive challenge.
Yeah.
Maybe for those that are watching, they've just entered into Christianity, they're just looking in, maybe they've been starting to walk with Jesus. Would you say, particularly around a church plant particularly, what would you say if they're sort of umming and ahhing, is a church plant a good place for me to grow in my faith, to understand what it is to be a disciple of Jesus?
Yeah, I mean, I think, like, it can be great to join all kinds of churches for all kinds of reasons, but I think one of the things, a friend recently asked me, like, why a church plant? And I said, well, church plants start out of nothing and they're shaped by the people that are in them. They're shaped by what the Bible says to us about what churches are meant to be like, but how it actually looks in a church is based on who's in it. So if you're new to faith, you get to bring who you are into something that hasn't yet got all its kind of rigid lines and systems and processes. You get to shape it. And I think that's exciting, isn't it? You get to bring in your passions and your questions and like we're on a journey together. We've known Jesus a long time. We've walked with him through from our teenage years right through to now into our 40s. But like we're excited watching a life of God be formed in someone who's like brand new to it and discovering, what does this mean for my sense of identity? What does this mean for my, my calling, my destiny, my vision? And I think coming into a church plant is like there's loads of space for you to work that stuff out and to shape us and to bring who you are into the culture of the church. So I think it's a great place to be, and I think we can get away from the kind of emphasis on everything involving other people and just turning up, taking your seat, like warming the pew in the old kind of style. Like,
that's the big advantage.
You can't do that in a church.
Exactly.
You're
like,
in the room.
You tend to get sucked into the middle a bit more.
Yeah.
And there's opportunities to serve, there's opportunities to lead, there's opportunities to do things. I mean, obviously there's loads of good things about more established, larger churches as well. So it's not like one is better than the other, but I think sometimes people feel nervous about church planting, like they have to be some kind of elite Christian to get involved.
Been a Christian a long time.
I think that's a false idea.
And even one of the benefits, and I know you guys are very humble people, but if you're starting out in faith, getting access to leaders and being able to just be shaped by people, like you said that you've been walking with Jesus for a long time, just to have that direct access is a huge thing in terms of just growing. It's amazing, and I'm so excited for what's about to happen. And I think to be able to sit here and say, actually, there's been a really healthy transition from you guys to me and Vicky. The fact that God called you specifically to Greenwich, but part of that call was to plant churches, plural, in London.
Yeah, it was never just a Greenwich thing. Yeah, it was almost like Greenwich was the clear thing, wasn't it? Was go to Greenwich and start churches across London. So it was in our heart right from the beginning.
So then let's come to, we're here in London Bridge.
Yeah.
And we're getting excited about telling people about Jesus. Everything that we've said so far, I think, will be really beneficial for somebody that's far down the road in their faith or new to it, can come and join. Geographically, talk to me a little bit about why have you landed on London Bridge?
Yeah, that's good. Do you want to chip in, or shall I?
Yeah, I don't know what I'm saying. I mean, it's funny, when we first moved to Greenwich, we used to always do this thing where we were kind of explaining what we were doing. I'd draw on a whiteboard, or a flip chart, like
we love a whiteboard.
A picture of a
map of the River
picture
Thames.
Of the River Thames, because Greenwich is, marked out by the U at the bottom of the U bend on the river.
A bit like the EastEnders line, kind of used to draw the line.
And then what was, I guess, significant as though like big X for Greenwich, and then we would kind of immediately say there's these other places nearby that were in our hearts from the beginning, so 15 years ago, and one of them was London Bridge, and even probably 7 or 8 years ago there were people in the church that were living in the area. We were praying about it together. The church kind of prayed for London Bridge. We did this thing where you started.
Oh yeah, I felt God speak to me about praying for the city, praying for London Bridge every time I go through it. So whether that's on the tube, on the Jubilee line, whether it was on the train, on the main line, just every time I went through the station, I just prayed for a church in London Bridge. I just kept saying, I just used to,
Wow.
even when the next station is London Bridge, I'd be like, let your kingdom come there, God, through a church. I don't think I thought then, when I was praying that the answer to that prayer might be God saying, I'm going to send you to do that.
Yeah.
I kind of felt like I thought I was praying for someone else's destiny.
Yeah.
But we carried it in our hearts and we wanted to see it. And so the last few years have been somewhat of a surprise in a way that as we've kind of done like a transition role in Greenwich and felt like we definitely still know London is the right place to be and there's churches to be planted. I think landing on like, I think we've got a sense God's been speaking to us really clearly, like it's time for you guys to go to London Bridge and don't just get on the train.
One of the reasons I think I always was praying for London Bridge and was excited about it was something about a bit more central in London, and therefore connected, like London Bridge is connected to the whole of London. And we moved to Greenwich, but we knew we had a real sense that God had called us to London as a whole. So London Bridge has got this kind of almost unique kind of connectedness. Like when you look at the transport lines, it kind of goes to all corners.
Everywhere, doesn't it?
So there's a sense in which I think we feel like a bit more of a connection to the whole of the city. And also, I guess one of the kind of the unique things about London is its kind of culture creating dynamic. And so being right in the middle of that, and the reality of Christians trying to live out their faith, working in the city, living centrally in the city, just socializing in the city. I think a lot of Christians are finding it, most of us, in honesty, we find it hard to know, how do I live out my life faithfully to Christ in this context, which is often quite opposed to some of the values that I would hold to. What does it look like to work in that? What does it look like to play in that, to live in that? And so wanting to plant a church that basically has got this opportunity to connect to millions of people that, come through London Bridge all the time, work, play, live, in and around the area, to think, how can we present Jesus to millions of people effectively? And there's obviously like a visionary faith aspect to that is kind of really exciting.
It's a hub, isn't it, as well? Because London Bridge is the station is literally like a place where millions of journeys are conducted through that station every year. But even when you're here, you feel like it's right on the banks of the Thames. It's right kind of opposite, a stone's throw away from kind of all the sort of central landmarks. And obviously the Shard's been built now, and it's almost like standing out, sort of screaming out to the world, like, here I am, here I am. But London Bridge is like a hub from which loads of people come in and go out. And I think we really believe God wants people to know him. And so I think he does that in places where lots of people are coming through. And so in different situations that looks different, but essentially for us, I think that feels like building something here that shoots out. And, maybe other churches will come out of it, from here into other parts of London. People will be part of this church with us for a season. And whilst they're here, they're working in the city, they're living in the city, they're with us, they're going to be shaped. And then they're going to go, and we're going to see people get sent into other parts of London, other cities of the world. Like, we feel like that's part of what God's spoken to us about doing, that we're not trying to build something that is kind of insular, but actually it's more like kind of something that's got life in it to kind of spread, a bit like all those train lines.
But the other thing I'd say is that one of the reasons like London Bridge appeals and is exciting prospect is it's very central, like as a kind of zone 1 area, but it's also, there's a real community. It's a proper place, it's not just a place where people travel in and travel out. People live here. There's a community that's actually really diverse in terms of the kind of people that live here, and we've always wanted to build that kind of church, that's got all kinds of people in it coming together, learning to love one another across different boundaries that would naturally separate, but in the gospel get brought together. That's, I think, an important picture of what Jesus does in our lives. So that kind of church in this kind of community that serves the actual community that live here, and makes a difference and blesses people and serves the vulnerable and brings a witness to the community, but also has this opportunity for massive reach across the whole city. I think it's the combination of those things for me that makes me excited about it.
So obviously, I've got the benefit of leading, but being part of the church that you guys started to. When you guys are talking, it's great, because I'm like, I know that you've done it before, and you said right at the start, by the grace of God, and I think it's right at the core of who you are. But it's just so exciting to hear your heart come out for this area and sending people. I guess it would be great to hear a little bit more about what are some of the things that you're dreaming about for this church? You touched on it, obviously, in terms of raising disciples and seeing people sent out, but are there other specific things that you'd be thinking about when this church gets established we would love to see?
Shall I do some specifics?
Go on.
And then we'll go. So we'll start.
And then I'll just interrupt you with all the other things that come into my head.
But we'll start.
Perfect.
No, I think there's actually some really clear things that I feel like
Sure.
led me into in terms of just looking at the life of Jesus, trying to understand that Jesus started the first church, like that's what he was doing for 3 years, and so we get loads of insights from that. And at the end of it, there was left after his ascension, there was 120 people in that upper room, and there's 120 people that had basically given themselves over to being disciples of Jesus, with real cost associated to it, so there's like a kind of God-centered, wholehearted commitment to the purpose and the cause of Christ. But within that, there were 12 that he particularly invested in, discipled, trained, prepared, sent out. And then there were 72 that he had kind of trained for mission, sent out to do evangelism and bring the power of God into people's lives everywhere they went. And he taught the whole group something about loving each other, living in community, caring for each other. So there was this kind of community dynamic. So I think for me, that's almost like, that's like in a short term, and he did that in 3 years, So we're not Jesus, sadly, but we are his representatives. So I feel like there's something that we're trying to imitate. Okay, the first few years are gathering 120, making sure that there's some people that we've invested our best energies into, and that God has helped us train and develop and grow. That there's 72 at least that have kind of basically trained for mission, witnessing to their friends, praying for non-Christians, inviting people into the church life, and everyone is learning to love each other across boundaries, across difficult situations. So I kind of feel like, okay, if we do that, we've got a church, and that's the kind of church that we all Christians kind of want to be in, a church that's doing all those things. Then I think there's loads of things, isn't there, that part of that, we feel like, I would love it to be this and this and this.
But also, even just part of that, I just think when God calls us to himself to follow Jesus, he's calling us into our like who we really are. He's calling us into like the trueness of what we're here for. So I just want to see a church where people find their destiny, where they like, I know why I'm here. I know why I was born. I know who I am. I know who I'm supposed to be. I know what's going to make me the most fulfilled life is going to be to follow God. And I've got a purpose. And I really want at the heart, we really want at the heart of this church to people feel like I'm supposed to be here. I didn't just drift in because I was around. I'm supposed to be here. But also like while I'm here, I'm going to work out who I am and who I'm going to be. And then so like kind of a sense of people getting their sense of call. And like for us, that was really young. Like we were students at university. We were turning over questions of like, should we get married like at 20? Because that's weird. People don't do that. And we were like, yeah, because I think we're meant to spend our lives together. Let's do that. Let's build the foundations in really young. And then, where should we live? Let's go and live somewhere that is not where we are majority culture. Let's go and live somewhere where we're minority culture, actually. And we lived in a community where if you were white-skinned, you weren't in the majority by any stretch of the imagination. And we learned so much about what it looks like to be in community with people who are not the same as you. But like, I think that needs to be at the heart of the church. That is going to be at the heart of this church. Like people finding who they are alongside other people, belonging to one another. Like, because you know as well that we are all about proper relational connections. Like it starts, with a beer or a coffee and you don't really know someone and, like an Instagram post that you're interested in, but it turns into a commitment that you want to see that person flourish and they want to see you flourish. And that sometimes means you have some pretty honest conversations. So integrity is really important, and we want to see a church where people are real, like not fake kind of Sunday, not like you kind of shiny face, I'm at church, but like this is it, life's tough, following God can be hard, stuff goes on in my life that confuses me. Church is a place where I can work that out, not a place that I have to pretend that's not happening. So a church of like proper vulnerable relationships and trust. And,
that all sounds good.
Yeah. And then there's the whole thing about generosity. Like, this is a money city. Like London is pumped with money, either making it, spending it, trying to work out how to, make it go as far as it can go, or living without it and struggling. Like that is the reality. That is the culture of London. God's got a lot he wants to say about money in the church, and he wants Christians to understand what money is for. He wants us to deal with and face issues of like social poverty, like injustice, like oppressive financial systems that basically are keeping people trapped. And be a church that breaks that and sees that change. But also he wants to speak about greed and comfort and materialism and the desire to just make money and spend money and have money and the power that gives. So
it's a big thing, isn't it?
generosity is big.
Okay, for all churches are supposed to be a counterculture within the city. They're supposed to kind of be a little model of the kingdom of heaven.
A different city inside
lived
the
out
city.
in front of you.
Yeah, brilliant.
And money is probably, there's a few areas, but money is one of the areas, like certainly for London, money is what drives the city. That's what kind of makes it tick. So we've got this opportunity as Christians to basically live out something that looks completely different to the kind of the way that the world is wired. And I don't know that we always do that as Christians. So I think we
fall a bit short.
We need grace from God basically to help us. What does that look like? What does radical generosity look like? What does sacrificial generosity look like? How's that lived out in community? How's that lived out when you don't have much? And how is that lived out when you're actually one of the really wealthy ones? And how do those two come together in the same community? Then there's not easy answers to those questions, but I think we certainly want to go on that journey and try and work out how can we do that as best as possible.
Yeah, so a church that authentically is walking with Jesus, living out what the Bible says it looks like to walk with him. It's been honestly a privilege to be part of a healthy transition, which has been great. Just want to honour you in this kind of context. It's
been a privilege genuinely for us as well.
Which
I mean it. Yeah,
it's fantastic.
To hand the church, when you plant a church,
It feels a bit like your baby, yeah.
So to be able to hand that community of people over to people that you trust and you can see leading and living with integrity and faith is a joy.
And to be excited that, there are seasons and like God's, like we feel really clearly like this is right, that our time in Emmanuel Greenwich is kind of come to an end. But what God is doing there has got like a whole new chapter that you guys are leading into. So we love watching that, Frank, and being alongside doing that. So
I wasn't fishing for compliments.
That's all right.
I appreciate
we can edit it out of the video.
Yeah, that's cool. But I mean, there's numbers of churches that are just cheering you on, and obviously including us, partnering with you particularly, and praying for you, standing with you. What about people that are watching that particularly want to get involved with this church plant? What's the next step for them? Where would you direct them?
That's good.
Yeah, I mean, just get in touch really on. So we've got a website, londonbridgechurchplant.com, where you can see a little bit more about what is going on, and there's a contact form.
And social, follow us.
Yeah, social media on Twitter, on Instagram. There's different ways of connecting. So, or if you know someone who knows someone, get in touch with. I mean, we're in the phase where we're just really happy to meet up with people, talk about what we're doing, pray with people, go on a bit of a journey. It's not right for everyone to join a new church plant, obviously. So just helping people kind of get to know us a bit and seeing what we're doing and letting God lead.
Fantastic. Well done. As I say, we are cheering you on, praying for you,
Thanks,
standing
mate.
with you, and we're excited to see what God's going to do.
Amen.
Amen.